All right, thank you, John, very much, and thank you all for coming out here today. I'm impressed that there's so many people here. I'm probably one of the few people here that is afraid of driving on LA freeways, and so you probably saw me when you were driving over here. I was driving in the emergency lane very, very, very slowly in an old police car, which is what the rental agency gave me. So anyway, without further ado, so today I'm going to be talking about performance and storytelling in American retail, and this is really just to kind of give just a little bit of insight in terms of what my approach is, and I think what a lot of people's approach is in terms of how they deal with sort of figuring out and focusing and fine-tuning the foundation of a brand. And it's an approach that I think is relevant not just in terms of your external constituents, in terms of your customers, but it's also important in terms of your internal constituents. So stories change lives and they make them meaningful. And I think that when we tell a story, it's our interpretation, it's our understanding of what the position of that brand is in our world. And I think it's also a way for us to sort of really give relevance to how we approach a project. And when I approach a project, I kind of look at it as a story. And I sort of try to understand what is it that we're trying to communicate to our customer, and what is it that we're trying to communicate to our client. So we use stories to understand our lives and give them context. The best companies are the ones that determine the narrative that supports what and why they do what they do. I think Facebook is kind of a good example of that in terms of that is very much what they are about, whether you love them or hate them. And I'm very ambivalent. I think that what they are doing for their customer is they really are enabling people to tell stories and to tell their personal stories about who they are.
This device isn't a spaceship. It's a time machine. It goes backwards and forwards. It takes us to a place where we ache to go again. It's not called the wheel. It's called the carousel.
So for all of you who might be Mad Men fans like I am, to me that is the best scene ever in the entire series. And for me it was the very moment when I really understood who Don Draper really was. But I also love it because it's absolutely true. That is what makes a product relevant. That is what makes a brand relevant. You're able to tell a story and make the consumer feel that they are able to tell their story. It becomes immediately personal. The problem with most brands, of course, is that we think of them on a very technical level, but we don't think of them in terms of a personal level, in terms of how they relate to who we are and how they relate to the actual consumer. So a great brand really allows us to connect with the world on a much more deeper level. And that's what I think our role is as a strategist. So definitely, stories drive the brand experience, and the brand experience in turn reinforces the promise. And that is what is the essence of a brand, for instance, like Apple. And again, many of us are very ambivalent about Apple in terms of what it is as a company. But in terms of what their brand promises and in terms of what their brand experience is, it really is based upon this idea of we are going to enable you to become a creative person. Now, you may not be a creative person at all, but I think that that's part of the charm and that's part of what people love about Apple, is that when they engage with Apple, they believe that they are more than who they are. And the product allows them to then engage with themselves, engage with other people in entirely different ways. So I love this quote from Steve Jobs: "Your customers dream of a happier and better life. Don't move products, enrich lives." So this is just another example, because this is really sort of what brought me to doing what it is that I do now. The idea of retail and how retail is essentially a storytelling experience. This is a Ralph Lauren 3D video that they did in New York, and they did it on the outside of a building. And to me, it captures the entire 3D essence of what a brand really is. So when we talk about storytelling and the brand experience, nowhere is that more important than in retail and in architecture and how you design. Sorry, that's getting a little loud there. Nowhere is that more important than when it comes to how the retail experience is projected. Luxury retail is all about that. My background is very much in luxury retail. Luxury retail is a very, very expensive way of storytelling. It basically completely removes the price, and it brings it straight to the essence of what the brand is, which is a dream. Where will life take you? There's nothing more beautiful, really, than that in terms of storytelling. It's one statement. Sorry. It's one statement that immediately communicates who you are as a brand. It speaks directly to you as a consumer, and it also speaks directly to what the brand is all about. Where is it that you will go today? Who is it that you will want to be today? And by the way, maybe the product will take you there. So the secret to a great story, to me, is that they demonstrate sort of how the brand entices, attracts, engages, and connects. That it's a process in terms of really understanding how is this story going to embrace not just the internal sort of workings of the brand, but also the external workings of the brand, and how the consumer is going to interact with it. So a great story, really, to me, in terms of a retail experience, is that it's immersive. It creates an immersive experience through content that is delivered in a multimedia and that is multisensory. It's interactive. It allows the consumer to become a part of that story. Luxury retail is very much about that. It connects the dots. It ensures that there is coherence across many brand touch points. This is something that so many brands actually do forget to do. Not everything is seamless. And when you really think about a great brand experience, whether it's a hotel, whether it's Herman Miller, whatever it may be, that there is that it is a seamless experience from beginning to end in terms of how the customer interacts with it, and in terms of really ensuring that you are always very close to the foundation of what your brand is about. And then it makes an impact. It gives the consumer confidence to move into action. So that is also very critical, that you're not intimidating the consumer, but that actually you're making them feel like they are part of the experience. So thought I'd give you a couple of case studies, and one of them, of course, is MediaTemple. And this was a really interesting project for me. One of the reasons why I left luxury retail, I was working in Asia for almost 7 years, in Korea and in China and in Hong Kong. One of the reasons why I left luxury was that after a while, it becomes very one-dimensional. It is very much built on this premise of a dream, but it's a very expensive dream, and you're not really reaching other people. I loved working on projects like technology because it really takes something that is, in many ways, very abstract, and you have to bring it down to an entirely different level in terms of the customer experience. So, here's MediaTemple faced with an enormous amount of competition in terms of hosting services out there. There's lots and lots of people that are offering hosting services. How does MediaTemple differentiate itself from the competition when they also are offering cloud services, when they are also offering amazing products that they can help you find domain names and so on? So one of the things that we thought about was, what is it that a hosting service does? And this is always, when I work with clients, this is always one of the things that they have a difficult time with, is really being able to communicate what it is they do without talking about what it is they do on a technical level. What is it that you do for the person who is interacting with you? So this is where we came down with the idea of, we host great ideas. This idea that we're not just a hosting service, we're not just making your website work. You have an idea, and we're here to host it for you. We're here to actually help you. We're here to enable you to make an idea come to life. And so this really kind of became a foundation point for us in terms of really understanding what the user experience is, what the website experience would be like, what is the customer service experience going to be like in terms of how do we use this as a premise for designing the user experience? How do we use this to really start to understand the different kinds of users who are coming to the site, the different kinds of users who are calling in and who need support, and how can we use this to then drive new product and new engagement? Another example is Bank of America. This is a project I worked on in conjunction with Gensler. I was with Gensler for 2 years, and then afterwards I continued as a consultant. And banks for many years had this strategy of, let's remove people from the banks altogether. Why don't we just shut down some of our banks? Why don't we have ATMs, right? The ATM is this amazing piece of technology. It can do everything that the bank is doing. So we don't really need actual retail experiences anymore. We can just use the ATM. So I think Bank of America was really sort of one of the first to say, we need to really engage with our customers in different ways. And we need to really explore this idea of a bank not being a bank, but a bank is a store, right? It's a place that does essentially sell products in much the same way that a hosting service sells products. So we started actually creating this prototype, and this is actually one of the prototypes that we worked on in terms of an actual built environment, of creating this idea of how could we reinterpret what the bank experience could be about. What are people actually coming there for? Besides the fact that you're depositing money, despite the fact that you're coming in to do a withdrawal or you're taking out a loan or a mortgage, that really banks are places where we build our futures. So we started playing with this idea of really that the bank becomes a place where you dream and where you build and where you make a plan. And that there are areas within the bank experience, in terms of the user experience, where you can go and actually start making plans for your future, for your children's future. And you can actually start, we actually had this wall, and this actually never ended up happening in the final version of the bank, but it was more an exercise for us. We had these sort of dream cards, is what we really called them. And it was a wall that had all these different cards, almost like, I called them tarot cards. But basically that you pull out these cards depending on what it is that you want to do with your life. And you arrange these cards on a table, and the person then opposite, the customer service person, then helps you arrange those cards and figure out a way to actually build a plan for you, a financial plan for you. So it was a really interesting exercise in terms of this idea of the Bank of Opportunity, which, as you all know, became really sort of one of their driving sort of brand strategies. But I think it also reinterprets the idea of what a bank is, that we have a very set idea in our mind of how a business should be operated. And I think that that's oftentimes one of the biggest challenges for brands, is to reinterpret who they are. Again, I mentioned this at the very beginning, a great brand story, it guides both internal and external constituents. That this is not just marketing, and I have to I tend to have to repeat this a lot, because I think people think that, oh, you're just really basically talking about a marketing strategy more than anything. It's really not. It is the basis. It's your operations. It's your it's your vision. It's your core strategy. It's everything that drives why it is you do what you do and how it is that you do it. It's really important that that's understood both for the internal, for the people that actually work for you, as well as for the customers themselves. And to be able to have this sort of manifesto that explains how it is you work and why it is you do what you do is really, really important. So what's your story is kind of how I always approach clients when I meet with them. Is I always say to them, what is your story? Let's not talk about what it is, the project that you're doing, but let's talk about what is the story? What is the story that we're trying to convey to our customer? What is it that we're trying to convey internally in terms of the foundation of who our brand is and what it is that we do?